Kakadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Shekalim Daf Aleph, page 11, 11a1, by Masechet Shekalim. We just said that according to Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman, he said that every time that it's written the word sima, which means, right, via sim or to place, right, which is b'derech klal written by the majority of the utensils, it's also me'akev, it also impedes the kashrut, the kosher of the korbanot. And that's why the shulchan, the menorah, the table, which they used to put the lechem panim, the menorah, the parochet, the mizbach zahav, the golden mizbeach. Remember, the golden altar was on the inside of the hechal, on the inside in the inside chamber. Vakior, right, which was the washing station, right? All of them, they impeded the korbanot. Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, kam ba'avodot shmifnim, kam ba'avodot shmechutz. He says it all depends. What was the service? Was it the service which was on the inside, or the service which was on the outside? Right? Remember that the service which is on the inside is the echal. The echal, inside the Bet HaMikdash, we had the ulam. The ulam was like a long corridor. And then we had the hechal, which that's where they used to have the menorah, the shulchan, and the mizbach hazahav, the golden mizbeach, the inner mizbeach. And behind that was a kodesh kodashim. It was like a building. Okay, so that building, right, was inside of the Bet HaMikdash. So that's called the inner, right, the inner services. It's inside the hechal. So there, for example, the ketoret, the incense, which was bought inside, was called also mizbach ketoret. Not only mizbach hazahav, the golden mizbeach, it was called the ketoret mizbeach, right? The menorah, the lechem panim, the placing of the blood of the chatat, which was on the inside. Okay, all these things were on the inside, so all these utensils are going to impede anything which was done on the outside of the echal. For example, the majority of the sacrifices, it's not going to be me'akev. It's not going to impede if you don't have all the different utensils. Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina. Okay, shachatzit gedola ita bivnei kohanim gedolim. Do you know that there was a very big haughtiness that was found in the children of the kohanim gedolim, meaning the kohanim gedolim? Sheyoter mishishim kikeret zahav motzim ba, because they used to spend for the building of the kevesh para, the building of this ramp for the para, right? They spent 60 kikaras of gold. So we're talking about a lot of gold. Okay, sheya kivsha shel para omed, right? Velo yacham motzi parato bekivsho shel chavero, because each one used their own kevesh, and nobody would use their friend's kevesh. Ela sotro ubonoto meshelo. He would destroy it and build a new one. Which means, if you remember, we were talking about that they used to make a kevesh for the paraduma. Okay, so they used to make a kevesh going from the Bet HaMikdash to the harazitim for the paraduma, the red heifer. Now, they wouldn't use anyone else's bridge, ramp or bridge, right? What would they do? They would destroy it and build a new one. So therefore, they were saying it's like a haughtiness, like, Iowa, you can't use the same one. You have to destroy it and build an entire new one, right? Hativ Rabbi Ula Kameh, right? Kumer Rabbi Mana. So ask Rabbi Ula in front of Rabbi Mana. Vatani Shimon and Tzaddik, Shte Parot asa. Says 1 second, but Shimon and Tzaddik made two different paradumas. Lo vekevesh sheotzi et zo, otzi et zo. So you see that he didn't even take it out from the same one, which means here it's the same person. We're not talking about two different Kohanim Gedolim or two different, right? And then they went and they destroyed it and they built a new one. The same Kohen Gadol, Shimon HaTzadik, right? That he went and he brought two, and each one was on a different ramp. So you're going to tell me now Shimon HaTzadik was a Shachataya? He was a Balgava. He was a Gavtan. You know what a Gavtan is? A person that's he speaks Hebrew. Yeah, a Gavtan is a person that has his nose up in the air. Yeah, you're going to tell me that Shimon HaTzadik was known. He was 40 years Kohen Gadol. He was like, you're going to tell me. Obviously, it wasn't him. So says the Gemara, Umay Kedon, right? So what's the reasoning then? Al Shem Ma'alai bepara silsuli bepara. Says, no, it's the opposite. It was a Ma'ala in the Paraduma. It was something so precious by the Paraduma, they never wanted to use the same bridge, right? The same ramp. They never wanted to do it. It's not because of haughtiness. It was because that they wanted it. It was such a precious thing. They never wanted to use the same one. They had to use like a different one. You understand? By the way, you should know that these things, they used to do it. It was known, whether it's in Mexico, Panama, certain places like that, they used to come and they used to make weddings, but there was only one wedding hall. And they never wanted to make the same wedding hall with the same design. So therefore, for example, let's say we had a wedding on Sunday, right? And you have a wedding 2 weeks later. You would come and you would renovate the entire hall for the next wedding. It was something that they used to spend fortunes on it. So either you could say that it's because of Gava, or you could say it was a Ma'ala. we did something special for it. You understand? It wasn't the same. It wasn't something just stump. You understand? Which there is some type of a logic behind it as well. So therefore, we always have to.
You would probably prohibit them from doing something like that.
They did prohibit them afterwards from doing something like that, which does make sense because you have a lot of people, right? You understand? By the way, you should know a lot of people, right? Especially, do you know that they made rules and regulations, whether it was in Panama and other places, that they can't spend more than a certain amount of money on certain weddings and things like that, because there were people that had to commit suicide because they were very, very affluent, very rich people. All of a sudden, they started losing a lot of money. But now what? They're going to make a party and it's going to be low standard. It's not up to their standard. It's a shoma. It's an embarrassment. So there were people that mamash they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. Yeah. Also, they did the same thing, right? They did a lot of things, but I'm talking about cities. I'm talking about like big cities and everything. Panama, Mexico, certain places. Rules. You want to make a wedding, maximum amount that you could spend on a wedding. Exactly. But yeah, why? Because they didn't want. It was just too much for everyone. Okay, very good. Tani, we learned. Zizinu ktalim ayu yotzim mikan umikan. Do you know that outside of the ramps there were like little tiny pegs that used to stick out, like little tiny things that used to stick out. In order that the kohanim should not come and they should not stick their heads out of the kevish, and then they're going to become tmeim, which means that on the sides of the ramp they made like certain like type of things, so therefore you couldn't go out. Because if you were going to go a little bit out and all of a sudden maybe there was a kever, there was a tombstone or something there, it would become tameh. Now remember, the entire purpose of the paraduma is that you want to do everything with tara, with purity. And with this purity, you're going to purify all the people from being tameh met. So they didn't want a person that's taking the parah to become tameh and they're making everything tameh. So therefore, they made sure that they made like these things all around the like borders, or I don't know how you want to call them exactly, so that way they wouldn't be able to stick out on the sides and they wouldn't become tameh. Okay. Next, we learned in the Mishnah, we're by the two dots. The two dots says, Rabbi Kiva says, "En mistakrim b'shel hekdesh," that you don't make the money from the hekdesh. So the Mishnah was talking about. Okay, the Mishnah was actually trying to come and tell us about the shiurei lishka, that they used to, with the leftovers of the money and everything, they used to take, whether it's wine, right, oils, flowers, and all these things, right? They used to buy this, and then they used to make money off of it. And says Rabbi Akiva, what are you talking about? You can't start making money off of Hekdesh, meaning that it's not proper to start making profit on Hekdesh. Yeah, that was yesterday's Daf. Yesterday's Daf was that they had the leftover money, they would come and they would take the money, right? They would buy flour, fine flour, oils, and wine. They would sell it. When they would sell it for a profit, that money would go to the Bet HaMikdash. So Rabbi Akiva argued, and he said it's not proper that you're starting to make money off of things of Hekdesh. You understand? It's not proper. Ela im ratzah, but if you want, I've said shelo v'aschal Hekdesh, then it's mutar. If you want, you could take the gamble. The gamble is you're allowed to do this. But what happens now if the value goes down?
It's on you.
If you lose, it goes on you. If you lose it, it goes on you. But if you gain, it goes to the Hekdesh. Now it becomes permitted to do so. You understand? Which means, remember, the Hekdesh never loses. The Bet HaMikdash or the Bet HaKnesset, the Bet HaMidrash, they never lose. They're always on the winning. You understand? Always on the winning. They never lose. Right? It's always on the what? The house wins. It's always the house wins. You understand? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it says here, Kadal bar zemina itpekat gabe midal yatmin. So it says, just like the story that happened with a certain person, his name was Bar Zemina, that he had, right, money of yatomim by him, money of orphans by him. So he came and he asked Rabbi Mana, can he do business with the money? Imagine, there's money sitting around. Chaval, if instead of just being stam in a trust, why don't they make some money, some profits of it? Amarle, he says, shari. He says, if it's going to be that the hefsed will be for you, right, but you will both gain, meaning that you're going to split the gains. So here was a little bit better. Here at least that he could also split the gains, but the losses, it's only his. So then it's going to be permitted.
It's got to be a case where the man is very, 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 very wealthy, or he owes some sort of bond.
Yeah, something like that. He
gets somebody who's no money be a person.
No, obviously not. It has to be somebody that's very okay. Fine. Rabbi Chia bar Ada ipaka gabe midal yotmin. So it says here, Rabbi Chia bar Abba had money of yatomim by him, right, of orphans by him. That's exactly what he did. Fine. Next, motar perot, the leftovers of the fruits. So we skip out the brackets. Matzita de Rabbi Shmelhi, right? Our braita is like Rabbi Shmuel, that it said the motar perot. It's like Rabbi Shmuel that he says that the schar goes to the Hekdesh, leftovers of the fruits. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef patar matznita. So Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, he actually explained our Mishnah Motar perot, the schar le'ekdesh, the motar perot, the leftovers of the fruits, they go to the ekdesh. Motar nesachim, the leftovers of the wine libations, zu se'ar ravit, is a se'ar ravit, which means that they used to actually buy 4 se'in of nesachim in the price for the price of 3, right? Because of the difference in the prices. And the one that was receiving it, he actually gained from the extra se'ah, which was from the motar nesachim. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan patar
And you can note here that you can't, even though normally between regular parties, this would not finalize a transaction.
Right, but here it does.
Here it does.
Here it
and
does.
It's, if you renege, they're going to curse you.
Yeah, okay.
Oy.
Fine. Next, Rabbi Yochanan patar matnita. Rabbi Yochanan came and he explained the Mishnah by saying motar perot zu se'ar ravit. The motar perot is actually a se'ar ravit. Motar nesachim, the leftover of the nesachim, is leberutzin. What does this mean? It says here it was godesh hamidot, which means that they used to give the necessities of nesachim to ekdesh. They used to give extra, like godshim et hamidot. So the ones that they used to give for korbanot tzibur or sheyonei nesachim that they used to sell to ekdesh, right, was the midot mechukot, was like exact amounts. You understand? But here they used to give it like in big quantities. Okay. So he says what? Reb Chia Bar Yosef doesn't hold of birutzin. So says the Gemara, Reb Chizkiya, whatever fell to the se'ar ravit would go to the birutzin, would go to the extra midot, would go to the, I don't know how you want to say it in English. So you would just give like a much bigger, you would give like with beracha, you would give with a big quantity. Okay? Fine. Right? So according to that which Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef said in the explanation of Motar Perot, it's going to be good. Because you can never gain money off of Ekdesh or off of the poor people. And therefore, that's why they wouldn't agree with Perot, because they were gaining off of Ekdesh. And according to them, they wouldn't do that. And it's also a question of Rabbi Yochanan, because we already learned in the Mishnah right later on. What happens right now if it changed the shar of 3 se'in with a selah? Right now, the person is obligated to give 4 se'in with a selah. So, which actually this is without a machloket, which means that everyone is agreeing that the ekdesh is always gaining. Utaninan, and we learned nobody agreed with perot. So you see from here that it makes sense why they wouldn't agree with perot, because again, the ekdesh is always gaining.
Okay? Can you just tell me outside what are they talking about here? What's the problem?
There's leftover fruits. What do you do with the leftovers? Or the leftovers of flour. There's leftovers of certain what was left over. So what would they do with it? It's ekdesh. It belongs to the Bet HaMikdash.
So there should be money. Should we sell it? And money would go to the temple.
Oh, very good. So the question is though, but when you're selling it, who gains? Are you going to sell it now? Usually, when you have leftovers, like for example, right before Pesach, a few hours before Pesach, or right at the end of Pesach, when people have a lot of leftovers in their stores, what do? They put everything on sale, right? So instead of charging you the fortune that they used to charge you, all of a sudden now, right, everything is going on sale. Why? Because they don't want to get stuck with it. You understand? It's a big risk. They're going to get stuck with it until next year. First of all, you have to pay for storage, and sometimes there are things which go bad. I remember there were certain places which they used to do trampas. You know what trampas are? They used to do tricks. So what do? Right? The expiration dates so they used to cross off expiration dates. Or they would lose the covers, kilu. Right? And then they would, you understand? They lost the cover. So the expiration date.
Everybody knows Hekdesh doesn't lose. So what are we learning?
No, so here there's machlokot, because here there were some opinions that said that the Hekdesh would give you in a big amount in order to sell it. But so there were other rabbis that they were against that, but they said the Hekdesh never lost, that they would never give you in a big, meaning that instead of giving you in a midah gedusha, which means like in a big biracha, like for example, instead of giving you a kilo exact, that they leveled it off, they would give you a nice kilo, and it used to actually have a little bit more.
Okay.
You understand?
Meaning that if you want to sell Hekdesh, you're going to have to take the risk.
Well, that's what the Gemara was saying in different opinions, but there's different opinions in the Gemara. Exactly. No, you're right. That's a general rule. That's what we're always coming out with. The general rule is like what you just said. The Hekdesh never loses, and they were always going to give, you understand? That's 100%. But there were different opinions.
Oh, so just going over the...
Yeah, we're going over the different opinions. Okay? Then it says here also, Lo yu modim beperot kaitz mizbeach, aval modim ayu bekli sharet. Also, they were moded to be Ishmael to do with the se'ar ravit used to be used for the Kaitz HaMizbeach. Remember, Kaitz HaMizbeach used to mean is that if there was going to be any type of time that the altar, that the Mizbeach was empty, they used to come and they used to be able to come and bring sacrifices because it wasn't kavod that the Mizbeach was empty. So that's Kaitz HaMizbeach. Kaitz is a summertime. Summertime is always usually means like a congé, it's like a vacation, right? So if they found that the Mizbeach had nothing there, so they used to bring to the Kaitz HaMizbeach, right? But they were modim to do with Kli Sharet, right? That the money used to be used for buying new Kli Sharet, buying new utensils for the Bet HaMikdash. Ad kedom berutzei tzibur, until we were talking about the Kli Sharet, which was for the korbanot tzibur. Vafilu berutzei yachid, and even if it's going to be talking about the korbanot yachid of an individual, velon insu Kli Sharet vayim mishel yachid. Now remember, right? But one second, how could you say that? Because you can never bring a Kli Sharet from an individual. Meaning, an individual cannot bring something which was communal. It had to be brought from the community for the community. That's what we said yesterday. If you remember, the clothing of the Kohen Gadol could be brought by his mother if she gave it to the community, and then it went to the son. But she cannot give it directly because nothing could come from the individual because it has to be a communal thing, not an individual thing. So he says, just like we learned, a woman that she made a ketonet, right, the checkered shirt to her child, to her Kohen Gadol, to her son, it's going to be kosher for him to use it, but she has to give it to the tzibur. And until here, we're also talking about that if it's only going to be moist, right? We're talking about liquids. But even if it's going to be dry, right, which is like fine flour, which is dry, he says it's also going to go to the Ketz HaMizbeach, even though you didn't sanctify it in the Kli Sharet. Just like we learned over there, we skip out the brackets. Right? The berutzei lach is going to be holy. But berutzei yavesh, if it's going to be dry, it's chulin. So why is it that way? Why is it that if it's a liquid, it becomes holy? If it's a solid, it's not holy.
Well, I thought you couldn't use it nasachim for one for the other.
So listen to what it says. It says, right? Because it was already going to be anointed on the inside, meaning that it was inside the utensil and the Kli Sharet, which was anointed. So it's going to consecrate, it's going to make holy the liquids which are inside of it. It wasn't done on the inside and the outside. So if there's going to be another type of a sacrifice, they're going to bring it with him. And if not, you're going to sell it for the Ketz HaMizbeach. Fine, says a Mishnah, right? We're on a new halacha. Halacha Gimel Mishnah. On the bottom of 11a, sorry. Okay? Miotara ketoret, the leftovers of the ketoret, which means at the end of the year, the leftovers of the ketoret that they couldn't bring, because now you have to bring from the new year, what would they do? Ma yosimai, what would you do with it? So says the Mishnah, mafrishim mimena lischar umanim. They used to separate from it for the schar, for the wages of the people that are working the Bet HaMikdash, for the salaries. And then they used to come and they consecrate it, right, for the umanim. Okay, so that's how they used to go out to chulin. They used to give it to them as their wages. That means they wouldn't give them cash, they would give them the ketoret, and then they would come and they would use this, right, as their wages. And then they would come and they would buy it back from the umanim, right, from the new truma. So basically, one more time, let's say I'm the one, the gizbar, the one in charge of the Bet HaMikdash. So I would have tons of ketoret. I have too much. Right? It already finished a year. We can't use it now from the bazaz to come from the new one. What would I do? Richard was working very, very well, very diligent, right? Putting tapes and all these things on top of books, right? Making that the books and the sidurim and everything, the Bet HaMikdash were properly used. So I have to pay him. So how am I going to pay him? So I would come and I would give him the ketoret, and I would tell you, okay, fine, I owe you $500, right? Here's the ketoret, the worth of $500. Then I would come, I would give him money, take $500 and buy it back from him. And I would use that ketoret for the new stuff because now it's now for next year, right?
Why not just
because I, first of all, how do we get money? Anything that we don't have money, right? So how are we going to get? We have new money, which is supposed to be used now for the new truma, right? For the new ketoret, for the new incense, not for the old. So how are we going to do it? Now I have incense, old incense, and I can't do anything with it. So what would I be able to do? I would give it to you as your wages. And then I would buy it back.
You can't sell it?
No. I can't sell it for normal things because they can't use it. They can't use that ketoret. The ketoret could only be used for the Bet HaMikdash. Right?
You're giving it to this guy for his wages.
Yeah, no, but listen carefully. I would give it to the guy for his wages, and then I used to buy it back from him.
What do you call it? A trumpet or whatever?
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. It's harama, it's called in Hebrew. Listen, it's a ketoret. When we read outside in the morning, right? It says gula for ashidut. That's why people fight for it. Yeah, people fight for it. You know how many people that I have to say the ketoret, right? Mordechai pays us double because we give him so much to say the ketoret. Yeah, but people pay for it. You know what that means? Yeah, it's a segula for riches, right? The ketoret, the incense, was an incense to Hashem. It stops plagues. There's a lot of important things for it, right? So therefore, this incense we couldn't use the old incense, so I would give it to Richard for his wages. I would then buy it back from Richard, and that money that I paid him was now his wages.
Right,
and then I would take back this old ketoret, and now it's new ketoret because I bought it with the new money, and then I would use it for the Bet HaMikdash.
Do they have like a business department for the Bet HaMikdash? Like,
For sure, they
it's like
needed
bunch
they
of
needed a chilu
salaries.
there. They needed a chilu there for all the business. Yeah, they're known for their very good. So it says here, once in a year they used to do this. And when it used to turn over to renew, and now they couldn't use it anymore, so they used to come and they say, okay, let's see the salaries of the Bet HaMikdash. Who do we owe money to? And let's Baruch Shepetranu. Let's get rid of them. Fine. Says now, Vimba Chadash Bizmano. If right now it came the time of the new shekalim, right, in the proper time, Nochinota, they used to buy it, right, Mitruma Chadasha, from the new Truma. Vimlav, and if not, Shana, from the old one. But the Avad, right, when you couldn't bring the Korbanot Tzibur from the Shikla Shochanav, the shekalim of the this year, so then they're kosher to bring it from the previous year. Says the Gemara, Velo Nimtza Ekdesh Mitchalel al Ekdesh. Says 1 second, it doesn't make sense. This trap, right, or like Richard said, this trampa that we're doing here, that we're trying to do this turnover, that we're giving him ketoret, buying it back, then using the old ketoret as a new ketoret, and so on and so forth. He says, I don't understand. This is not being mitchalel ekdesh on hekdesh. So says the Gemara, what would you do? He says you would bring money and you're going to deconsecrate it on the building, right, on the Bet HaMikdash, okay? Because the Bet HaMikdash was built from chulin, and then you have to sanctify it. So therefore, the money already went out on chulin, and now, right, you will be able to do this, okay? Yudalef Amubet. Umevi ketoret umchalel alen. Then you would bring the ketoret, and you're going to be mechalel laman on it, and then you would give it to the umani in bischaran. So basically, you would do it in a different fashion. You would do it on the building. You would deconsecrate it on the building, and then you would be able to do it like this. Otara ma'ot ma yaseben. So the money that they had for the leftovers of the ketoret, so then what would they do with them? Rabbi Omer says, "Aomer ani yinatnu lebet garmu ulbet avtinas shayu bekim bepitum haketoret maaseh lechem hapanim." They used to give it to the bet avtinas and bet garmu. They were experts in making the ketoret and making the lechem hapanim, and therefore they get their rewards, they get their sechar, their wages, their salaries from the trumat alishka. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak, says Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak. But this is only going to be if they're going to be obligated, right, in giving the money from the first time around. Okay? He says 1 second. If right now, right, if there was no ekdesh obligated to the umanim, the craftsmen of Bet Garmun, Bet Avtinas, right, from the last year, so what are they going to do? Meaning, what's happens if they already paid them? There's nothing left. Meaning, we don't owe them anything. So says the Gemara, Atar of Bevai or Ravba, B'Shem Rav Chia, B'Shem Rabbi Yoseh, Mekaitzim Menet HaMizbeach. So then they would buy for it olot for the Kait HaMizbeach. Remember, Kait HaMizbeach were burnt offerings that everything would be offered to the Mizbeach, and that would go straight to the Mizbeach. So that's Kait HaMizbeach. That's called the Kait HaMizbeach. Okay? Rabbi Bar Kohen, Bai Kiyomei Rabbi Yoseh. He asked in front of Yoseh, Mechalfa Shitid Rabbi Chia Barba. Are you going to tell me that we have to switch the Shita of Rabbi Chia Barba? Taman tzricha over there we need v'chem pshita le, and it's obvious, right? Obviously, which means there it was a safek. So here you're going to tell me that's for sure. Meaning, what happened that over there we asked the question and we were in a doubt, and all of a sudden we're asking the exact same type of a question, and all of a sudden we're certain in the halacha that it goes to kaitz mizbeach. So he says like this: Ad tzricha le bekli sharet, had pshita le bekaitz mizbeach. No, we had a doubt. Can you use it as kli sharet? When was it certain to use it at Kayitz HaMizbeach? To do it Kayitz HaMizbeach, for sure you could use it. Because Kayitz HaMizbeach always went to the Mizbeach, right? And therefore you could use it for the Mizbeach. But the Kli Sharet, buying new utensils, that's where there was a doubt, whether we could do that or not. Palgun, because when there was a machloke between them, by Pitma Bechulin, if right now, if a person came and he did the Ketoret in a utensil which was mundane, meaning a utensil which was not holy, it wasn't Kli Sharet. Rabbi Yosef Rav Chanina, Amar Yosef Rav Chanina says Psula. if you took the incense and you made it in a kli, not sharet, in a kli chol, it's psula. Rishon ben Levi says it's going to be kosher, right? Why? Because the ketoret does not need kiddush kli b'achanata. So therefore, there's a machloka between them. So my tama the Rabbi Yosef b'chanina. What's the reason Rabbi Yosef b'chanina? Kodeshi, because it says by the ketoret that it's kodesh. Shetei avayata b'kodesh, has to be done with kodesh. My tama the Rishon Levi. What's the reason Rishon Levi? Kodeshi shetei ba mitumal talishka. Kodeshi that has to come from tumat talishka. Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yabun, says Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yabun, Atya Rabbi Yosef Chanina Shemuel or the Rishon ben Levi b'Rabbi Yochanan. He says Rabbi Yosef Chanina is like coming like the words of Shemuel, and Rishon ben Levi is coming like Rabbi Yochanan. Titanina, but we learned in the Mishnah, Hamagdish nechasav. Imagine a person consecrates all his properties, and he wants that it should go to the Beit HaKbayit. That means it goes to the upkeep of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, Vayuba and Dvarim Reuin lekorbanot tzibur. Now there are certain things which are fitting to become as korbanot tzibur, like as communal sacrifice. Rabbi Yochanan says, ketoret. According to Rabbi Yochanan, let's say you had this ketoret, right, which was chulin, right, in the property of a yachid. So now it's going to be fitting for korbanot tzibur. So it comes out that according to Shitat Rabbi Yochanan, even the ketoret, which was not in a kli sharet, right, you're allowed to bring it. You could bring it as a, that means you see that according to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't need the kli sharet. You don't need a holy utensil to make the ketoret, to make the incense. Okay? So Amar Rabbi Oshia says, Tiftor be'uma mishel bet avtina sheyanotel b'scharo ketoret. Says no. Why don't we just explain our Mishnah that we're talking about a certain family of bet avtinas that they used to take their ketoret, their money for making the ketoret from the Bet HaMikdash, right? Just like we learned above. So therefore, right, it became holy in his property. So according to that, that's why it says, right, that's why it's going to become kosher to be brought. Okay? Rav Yosef bar Chanina k'Shmuel. Rav Yosef bar Chanina holds like Shmuel. It says Rav Huna name of Shmuel. Hamachteshet asota k'kli sharei lekadesh. The machteshet that they used to, machteshet was like a mortar. Yes, a mortar that they used to use to crush, to pound the samanim, right, the different incense for the ketoret. So they made it like a kli sharet. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Rebun, says Rabbi Yosef bar Rebun. Amra Rabbi Yechuna kamed Rabbi Yosef, says Rabbi Yechuna name Rabbi Yosef. Davar shekadash b'kli sharet nifde. Are you going to tell me that something which was consecrated, right, in a kli sharet, you could redeem it and you could take it out? How do you do that? So Amalei, so he says, "Velo Shmueli." It's not the Shmuel. The Shmuel Amar kalu bemotar. It's an extra leniency that they did by korbanot tzibur that was left over. That means usually you cannot do so, but if you have leftovers of the korbanot, we had a special leniency to do the leftovers that you were able to redeem it. Even though usually you cannot redeem these things, here was a special leniency. But when was the machlok between them? Hotiru tmimim. What happens if they had regular sacrifices, tmimim, without any blemishes? They had leftovers. Yeah? So it says, Shmuel says, nivdin kitmimim. You have to redeem them like tmimim. Rabbi Yochanan says, nivdin kitsulem mukdashim. They're going to be redeemed like psulem mukdashim, right? Like the desecrated ones. So it says the Gemara, hotiru seeding, right? If right now there was leftovers in the seeding, in the Sireh Chatat Tzibur. Remember that on the Musaf or things like that, they used to have he-goats. Seirim is a he-goat. Okay? So they had Sireh Chatot Tzibur that they weren't able to bring broth anymore in the new year because it was already from last year. So that's the Shmuel, according to the Shita Shmuel, im ola niftet, if right now it's going to be redeemed, lo kol sheken chatat. If you could redeem an ola, kol sheken you should be able to redeem a chatat because it's a kal v'chomer. That's what we're saying. If right now the olah, the leftovers of the olah, if the leftovers of the olah, yes, but they were lenient because it was the old ones. It was from last year. It was the leftovers. It was leftovers. Yeah, that's what we're saying. Well, you could redeem it. That's what we just said. We said it was a special leniency by leftovers. It was a special leniency that even though usually you cannot redeem, you're right. But even though usually you cannot redeem it, here we had a special leftovers, a special deal with the leftovers that you were able to redeem it. So therefore, we're saying if you could redeem the olah, chatat kol sheken. Right? Why? Because he says over here, in order that we should bring the new chatat. Now, why is it exactly that we're going to be more lenient in an olah than a chatat? Because even if we were going to wait until it gets a moon, right, at the end, you're still bringing the korban, a type of a korban. Okay, so he says over here, which is olot. The chatat though, right? He says, if you're not going to be able to redeem it, right? So then you're going to wait until it gets like a type of blemish or whatever it is. So therefore, it's going to be brought as an olah, not as a chatat. So therefore, you completely annul the chatat as well, right? Because remember, kaitza mizbeach is always olot. It's always burnt offerings. It's not chatat. You never bring a chatat if you don't need to bring a chatat because it's a sin offering. sin offering, you're not going to bring a sin offering to Hashem. It's not kavod. Okay? So under the Rabbi Yochanan, on the stat of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Zira says, Rabbi Zira, yir'u, right? You have to wait until it grazes and it gets a blemish. And then you're going to resell it and you're going to use the money for the olot or the ketz mizbeach. Right? Which means we're going to bring them themselves as ketz mizbeach. It means you don't have to redeem it at all. Then themselves, you bring on ketz mizbeach. You don't have to redeem it. Before we said you had to wait until it grazes, gets a blemish, redeem it, and then buy a new one.
What are these animals or leftover animals for olas?
Yes, for olas. That's what we're saying. Okay, so says the Gemara, Bekashia, we have a question. Yesh chatat shekreva ola. Does there exist that you could bring a sin offering as a burnt offering? Doesn't exist. So Amar Rabbi Yosef says Rabbi Yosef Shanyahi. He says, no, it's different the chatat that we're talking about than a regular chatat. A regular chatat, no, you're right. But here we're talking about a korban tzibur of a chatat. She'en korban tzibur nikvim minav shechita. Because the korban tzibur is only going to be nikba once it becomes done the shechita. So therefore, once it gets slaughtered, that's when it becomes. So as long as it wasn't slaughtered, you could change it and do it for another sacrifice. So therefore, right. So therefore, you could do it like a zonola because it was right because it wasn't sacrificed yet. It wasn't slaughtered yet. Sorry.
Communal chatas where all the community made the same mistake.
Yeah, that was a no. Communal chatat was usually brought on Rosh Chodesh, for example, or on Kippur, and this communal chatat was brought on behalf of the entire community. Okay. So now it says over here like this. Amar Rabbi Yechia says Rabbi Yechia, Tnai betin hi al motar sheikrevu olot. It's a tnai betin. The betin made a special condition that on the leftovers they were able to bring it olot. That means even though, right, it was going to be, for example, a chatawa, anything which was left over was going to be brought as an olah, right? And that's it. And then tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, we continue with halacha daleh. So tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, is Friday, and then Bezat Hashem, we're going to be doing